Good evening, everybody, and welcome into another virtual program with the Schaumburg Library. My name is Chris. I am the Adult Programs Coordinator here at the library. I'm so excited to have you all with us this evening for our first session of Night with the Museum for 2026. I'm so excited to be joined by the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute and our friend Charles Wood, and I'll introduce him here in just a second. But before I do, just a few of our friendly Zoom reminders. First, wow, my brain just shut right off. Excuse me. Bleh. First, your cameras and microphones have been turned off. If you're experiencing technical difficulties during the program, uh, you can reach out to me using the Q&A feature on your Zoom toolbar. And if you have questions for our presenter, that's another great place to throw your questions. We will take all questions at the end of the program, but feel free to drop those in the Q&A as you're thinking of them. That way you don't forget what you wanted to ask once we get to the end. We have also enabled closed captions, and you can turn those on or off as you wish using your Zoom toolbar. Now, without further ado, I'd like to formally introduce Charles Woods. Charles Woods has a BA degree in history from Xavier University of Louisiana. Charles has experience working as an educator and has even been excuse me, even been a middle school teacher. Currently, as the education director and trainer for the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, Charles is responsible for the organization's after school, early literacy, young adults, and general education programming. Charles has an MA degree in organizational leadership with a focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility from American College of Education, and a master's in library and information science with a concentration on social justice for archival science from the University of Alabama. Everyone, Charles Woods.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Um, like you said, my name is Charles Woods III. I am the education director and trainer at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Now we'll go ahead and get started. Um, see how this works. So the mission of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute is to enlighten each generation about civil and human rights by exploring our common past and working together in the present to build a better future. We are situated in the Birmingham Civil Rights District. And we are also part of the Birmingham Civil Rights National Monument, which is one of the last things that President Obama did before he left office. And that includes the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, the A.G. Gaston Motel, Kelly Ingram Park, 16th Street Baptist Church, St. Paul's United Methodist Church, and Bethel Baptist Church. We are located at the corner of 6th Avenue North and 16th Street North. This is the historic Birmingham Civil Rights District. This is the historic 16th Street Baptist Church that you see in the background. And this memorial right here is a memorial to the four little girls who lost their lives in a bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church on September 15th, 1963. And so we've been around for a little while. We were originally founded in 1992. And we wanted to tell the story of the Birmingham civil rights movement. And that is really shrouded around really three major events, all occurring in 1963. 1963 being probably one of the most tumultuous years of the civil rights movement. Many of those serious situations happening in the city of Birmingham. And so we like to show how the events that occurred in Birmingham led to lasting change throughout this nation and was a catalyst for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 being passed and ultimately the Voting Rights of 1965, as it was the foot soldiers from the Birmingham movement that assisted in organizing the voting rights movement in Selma, Marion, and the Black Belt of the state of Alabama. So Project C um, was a campaign that brought Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to Birmingham. It was a thought and an idea from Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, who is this young man right here to the furthest left. And Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth is the civil rights leader of the city of Birmingham. He's a co-founding member of the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. And that's the organization that picked up the civil rights movement after the outlawing of the NAACP in the state of Alabama. We all know who Martin Luther King Jr. is and Ralph Abernathy from their involvement in the Montgomery bus boycott. And it was also the integrating of the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa, that put a radar or a target on the NAACP's back. And the state thought that they could stop this movement by ending the NAACP's foothold in the state of Alabama. Yesterday, we celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. Day at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. That is one of our largest events of the year. We saw about 3,000 people on yesterday in one day. It's a free day for us, sponsored by FedEx. And this is our opportunity to honor Martin Luther King Jr. and what he was able to do to help make lasting change in this country and just honor his legacy and especially the things that he did in the city of Birmingham. This is one of my favorite pictures of Martin Luther King Jr. That may sound a little weird, but King was arrested over 30 times, and each time was a significant event as he never ran from his warrants. He always showed up in court. And here in Birmingham, they thought it was a good idea to show the adults in the city of Birmingham what it meant to be an activist and to go to jail for the cause. The adults in Birmingham were not really willing to join the SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights in Birmingham. And so this is when the children started to volunteer. This is why King was already incarcerated. And while King's incarcerated, he writes his famous letter from a Birmingham jail as a response to 8 clergy members who wrote a letter, did an op-ed letter in the Birmingham News telling King that he should come back later on and that what he was doing was not the right time in the city of Birmingham. And King eloquently writes probably one of the greatest documents, American documents in our nation's history, and basically puts it on the line and lets the world know why people are marching, why they can't wait, and um, if you're not gonna help, then you kind of need to stand to the wayside. Those bars that you see right there, King sitting behind at the Birmingham jail, it's one of our focal points in our institution, as we have those exact bars that King was behind when he wrote the letter from a Birmingham jail. We also have in our archives, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute is a fully functional museum and also has a fully functional archive. And in our archives, we also have the stool that King had in his cell, as well as a chair that he sat on in one of his cases here in the city of Birmingham, and some other artifacts. But while King's incarcerated, they go ahead and organize the youth. Fred Shuttlesworth, Ralph Abernathy, the SCLC, James Bevel, and others organized the youth, and they used 16th Street Baptist Church as the focal point, as the place for all to gather. And Fred Shuttlesworth would let them out 50 at a time. They had 3 routes. And the most known route was in the Keller Ingham Park. Now, it was Bull Connor, the Commissioner of Public Safety, that devised a plan to allow Birmingham Fire Department and the Birmingham Police Department to become weaponized against their citizens and using those high power water hoses against these children as they protested the segregation and oppression in the city of Birmingham. Young people were attacked by dogs and bitten. It's a doctor that lives around the corner from where the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute is located, that's now called the Ballard House, but he was known as the dog bite doctor, as he was a black physician that was able to treat students as they were being bitten by dogs, and then send them back out there to continue to protest. These young people became the catalyst behind this movement now known as the Children's March or the Children's Crusade. And it almost became fun for the children to band together and go out and face these hoses and face these dogs and show the world how bad it was for African American in a city like Birmingham, considered the most racist, oppressive city of its size in the nation during this time period. These images you see we have in our archive, and it shows the effort of these young people and how they rallied together to make change in the city of Birmingham. Children were not only, let's go back, children were not only sprayed with water hoses and dogs sicked on them, but many were incarcerated for up to 7 days. Once the jails began to get filled in the city of Birmingham, they filled the Birmingham City Jail, they filled the Jefferson County Jail, as well as the Bessemer City Jail, which is a city on the outskirts of Birmingham. And with so many children being arrested, they had to make a makeshift prison or a jail cell at the state fairgrounds in the petting zoo, where the animals reside, as this is a fenced-in, caged-in area. In those 7 to 8 days that this campaign lasted in early May of 1963, you had over 5,000 children that were arrested. Youngest child arrested was 4 years old. He was a young boy, and the youngest girl arrested was 6 years old. These are the types of stories and things that we tell at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute as we try to honor the things that occurred in Birmingham during the segregation era. Birmingham Civil Rights Institute is a living memorial, opened its doors in 1992, and was originally the brainchild of one of our former mayors, Mr. David Vann. David Vann was in Israel and saw a presentation at a museum about the Holocaust and was inspired to come back to Birmingham and hopefully create an educational institution that told the significant Birmingham civil rights story. The problem was is that when he returned back to Birmingham, soon thereafter, there was a incident in the city where, excuse me, where a young black unarmed woman was killed, shot in the back by a white police officer. And the mayor, David Vann, at that time did not handle that situation in the best way. The black community then pushed an individual to run for mayor, and that individual won. His name is Dr. Richard Arrington, and he was Birmingham's first black mayor. This is in 1979. Richard Arrington is told about the idea of creating this institution by David Vann, and he thinks this is a good idea as well. He begins then to commission Miss Odessa Woolfolk, who becomes the chair emeritus of the organization, and heads the task force to begin to get funding to create this institution. Now, some of our core values are truth telling about history, justice and recognition, and education as liberation. The problem was is that when you want to create an institution of this nature, you do open up old wounds. You do bring up history that some people want to forget. And therefore, there was pushback initially in creating this institution. It took several years, some bonds established by the mayor, and really bringing people together and sitting down and having difficult conversations, is what brought this place to fruition. We are a Smithsonian affiliate institution, and our building was designed by Black architect Max Bond. This is a picture of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Has a very iconic and recognizable green roofed dome, and is designed in a way that is to invite individuals into a place of remembrance. Along these flower beds lie rosemary. The rosemary herb is a memory activator, so that as people are leaving this institution, they are activated to remember the things that they've learned that they've read, that they've seen while at our institution. The Birmingham Civil Rights Institute is broken up into several different galleries, each attacking a major characteristic of what life was like for African Americans during the civil rights era in the city of Birmingham. Our Barriers Gallery highlights things that were established to treat African Americans as second class citizens after the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments have given them what they needed to be um, civically engaged in our nation and try to live out the American dream. In the Barriers Gallery, you'll see things like how African Americans had to ride public transportation. In a city like Birmingham, blacks had to get on the front of the bus, pay their fare, then exit off that front entrance and enter in through the rear entrance. And so we try to tell a story that shows how these physical barriers were created so that African Americans would not be first class citizens, but we also show the resilience of the Black community and how they overcome these things and were able to establish a thriving, separate community with their own products, services, businesses, social clubs, schools, ultimately, um, and other aspects. But also in the Barriers Gallery, we want people to understand that even though Birmingham was the most segregated city of its size during the segregation era, it was probably the worst place for a black person during the segregation era, that these aspects of keeping people separate had nothing to do with proximity or people being near each other. Segregation was mostly about power and control and establishing and functioning in the American caste system, and also creating a feudal system where African Americans were relegated to second class citizenship in economics with pay and salary. And then also in a state like Alabama, where they only allowed African Americans to be educated to the eighth grade or the 10th grade, was a means to keep African Americans from being able to function and create a middle class by enrolling in colleges and universities and getting higher paid jobs. Confrontation Gallery highlights how the Ku Klux Klan utilized what happened with Brown v. Board of Education, doing away with segregation as a rule of law and separate but equal, and how they use that to fuel violence in the city of Birmingham, giving it its nickname Bombingham. Over 50 unsolved bombings in the city of Birmingham. Only bombing where you saw loss of life was with the four little girls in 1963 on September 15th. Movement Gallery starts to show how the movement is now began and people are marching and campaigns are beginning, and how the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights and Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth pick up this movement and begin to do direct action campaigns in the city of Birmingham. And then we also have a human rights gallery that shows the connection between other parts of the world where they utilize the premise of allowing the youth to be activists to fight for whatever they want to fight for in their respectable countries. So we highlight places like Tiananmen Square in China, the apartheid movement in South Africa, the Oconee tribe in Nigeria, and some other locations. We have all kinds of now multimedia and technology throughout our galleries. I'm so excited. Multimedia presentations. We used to have flip books of real newspaper articles throughout our galleries that have been changed now because of COVID. So now they are a touchscreen flip book where you can see articles that were written about the civil rights movement in all parts of the country and also Birmingham, and then things specifically about Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth. This is the beginning of our Barriers Gallery. It's probably one of our biggest photo opportunities throughout our galleries. an old white and colored drinking fountain that highlights how the idea of separate but equal is totally asinine, mainly because these two water fountains, the water comes from the same source. But as you look at this, you see that the white drinking fountain is actually a drinking fountain, whereas the colored drinking fountain is more of a repurposed sink with exposed pipes that allowed it to not get a very cold drink during the summer. Uh, More photos about the Children's March and how the children took over this campaign, probably one of the most successful civil rights campaigns of them all. Children came in droves and got arrested in mass. And Miss Janice Kelsey is, I believe, the young girl that you see looking at the camera closest to the screen. And she's one of our local foot soldiers. And so, one of the things that the Civil Rights Institute tries to do is make sure that it is currently and consistently telling the stories of not only our civil rights leaders, like you see here, Martin Luther King Jr. and Fred Shuttlesworth in conference with others, but also those ones who were the boots on the ground, the ones who were on the front lines. And the reason why we call them foot soldiers. Birmingham Civil Rights Institute is an educational institution. And our goal is to use the past as a teaching tool and an educational tool, to try to make our future better, especially focusing on young individuals and school age children. We have K through 12 programs, mostly focusing on literacy. We also do professional development and trainings for teachers. State Alabama just recently changed their social studies standards, and so we will be coming together to develop curriculum to help use these new standards to continue to teach the history that our children deserve. We do have a fully functional oral history project. If you go to our YouTube page, BCRI, and then follow the link on that page to our oral BCRI oral history project, we have over 100 oral histories from major players in the Birmingham Civil Rights Movement, but also just the civil rights movement in general. Also, people like David Vann and others who were instrumental in the Civil Rights Institute come to fruition. And then also just iconic individuals, people like Brian Stevenson, people like John Lewis, and others. And one of the biggest things that we do is our youth program. We have a high school age youth program called the Legacy Youth Leadership Program. It is a docent program. These young people come together from Jefferson County, all different types of schools, all different types of people, very diverse. And they come together for about 12 weeks every Tuesday night for a very um, intense American history lesson. This is Mr. McNeely. He is the director of the program. And they learn this history, learn the many aspects behind American history. They learn about where stereotypes come from. They learn about biases and learn about just just why Birmingham was a catalyst for the civil rights movement, but also um, a catalyst for making change in America as a whole. And so they also get to go on field trips and have interactive experiences where they get the narrative not only of Birmingham, but really the state of Alabama and also the Southeast region. They may go to Memphis, Atlanta. They most definitely go to Montgomery and Selma. Um, as they learn this history and hopefully become leaders in the world and help make change in this nation later on. There's a few pictures of different cohorts of this program. It's a really excellent program. We're going to be celebrating our 20th year in 2000, I mean in 2027. And all of these individuals have gone on to do great things in our society. We have people that work for the FBI, we have lawyers, we have teachers, we have um, marketing individuals. We uh, just a great plethora of young people who have passed through this program, who have learned this history and understand how to go out and make change in the world. And so, like I said before, um, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute is committed to not only remembering leaders like Dr. King, Fred Shuttlesworth, and Ralph Abernathy, but really understanding the movement came from those individuals that many people just never heard of and don't know who they are. We're losing these people at a rapid rate as they are starting to age out and transition. And the Civil Rights Institute is just dedicated to making sure that those individuals' stories are being told, that they are being reflected throughout our institute, and that we honor their sacrifice and their legacy. I just want to highlight some more of those individuals, especially Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth. There's a statue outside of our institution of this individual. He's probably the most unsung civil rights leader of them all. His church was bombed on three different occasions. The very first time was actually on Christmas Day in 1956, while he lived in the parsonage, just a half a foot gap from the church, where the KKK put 11 sticks of dynamite outside his bedroom window. And Fred says that when that blast went off, it literally blew him into the ceiling and said he came down into a crater where his bed used to be. Realizes that his house has a little fire going on and that the ceiling has collapsed around them. Has to get his wife, two of his children, one of his deacons, and his deacon's wife out of that building. When they finally emerge from the rubble, a crowd had already formed, and a woman says, "God save Fred to lead the movement." And as Fred embodied this Masonic persona, police officer emerges and tells Fred that he should get out of town because this is pretty bad and it could get worse. And Fred tells him that he's here for the long haul because in that blast he heard God's voice. And God told him that as long as he's doing his work, he cannot die. And Fred took that to be a literal. He did not consider himself to be an activist. He considered himself to be an actionist. And he had to be that type of person to counteract Bull Connor, the commissioner of public safety in the city of Birmingham, who was a heavy segregationist and did not mind being violent to bring his point across. There's more pictures of the young people, the people that really picked up this campaign and made it probably one of the most successful civil rights campaigns of them all. These are children actually getting into a yellow school bus as they're being arrested. And this was an anomaly for these children because they had to ride the city bus to school. And so many of them were eager to get on this yellow school bus, even though it was taking them to jail. One of our other iconic foot soldiers from the civil rights movement. We have a section in our movement gallery that highlights the efforts of John Lewis and James Orange, who is from Birmingham, and Jimmy Lee Jackson, who lost his life being a voter register um, in Marion, Alabama. And I just love this iconic photo of John Lewis. This painting we have um, in our hallway leading out of the institute as you're exiting, and programming that we used to do with John Lewis and an organization that he headed while being a congressman for the state of Georgia would come to the Civil Rights Institute yearly, and we were able to snap this photo of him basically looking at himself. And he really enjoyed this painting. He thought it was dead on. And so, like I said before, we do have a archive, fully functional archive where we keep not only oral histories of the foot soldiers and movement participants, but we have photographs, documents, correspondence, personal artifacts, especially of Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, memorabilia. We have a lot of Birmingham Negro League baseball memorabilia and artifacts. And we also have audio visual materials and recordings that people can use for research purposes if they get a hold of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Our website is www.bcri.org. And we are continuing to function in our mission and bring these stories and this information to people nationwide. Some of the other things that we connect to the historical struggles of contemporary challenges and human rights, social justice, and equity. We do programming of all sorts. The Birmingham Civil Rights Institute also exists to be that place where difficult conversations occur, where programming happens that deal with the issues at hand and the issues of the day, and that bring diverse populations together to um, have those conversations and hopefully plan together to make change in the future. And so um, we are going to celebrate our 34th year anniversary this year. We just recently gave Eric Holder our Fred Shuttlesworth Human Rights Humanitarian Award, which is the award that we give to individuals who are doing good work in our society and embody the characteristics of Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth and the characteristics of the award. And so the work continues. We are currently getting ready for our Black History Month programming, where we will highlight that it's the 100th year anniversary of Black History Month, where we will highlight some of the um, intricacies of not only Black History Month, but all of the different things that we've learned from Carter G. Woodson, establishing Black History Month and bringing to um, a national awareness the contributions of African Americans to the history of America and the world. And so, um, I guess there's time for some questions. And I thank you all for your time and allowing us to be a part of this wonderful night at the museum. I hope I did it justice. Thank you
Sure.
again.
Charles, thank you so much. It was absolutely wonderful. Anybody has any questions for Charles about the presentation or the please feel free to throw those in the Q&A. Oh, yeah. Questions to come to Charles? Question for you for myself. Do you have a favorite exhibit or item in the collection at the museum?
I'm sorry, I don't know if your
Oh,
voice is muffled or something that I couldn't hear you very well.
I had my mic turned up and away from my mouth. That would be why. I'll repeat what I said. For
Okay.
all of our friends at home, if you have questions for Charles, please feel free to throw those in the Q&A or the chat for either anything about the presentation or anything about the museum. And while we wait for those questions to come in, Charles, do you have a favorite exhibit or a favorite artifact in the collection?
Wow. So we have these actual slave shackles
Hmm.
in our archive that are like a ball and chain. And so that's one artifact in our archives that I'm just still kind of every time I see it, I'm like, wow. Has a key on it, and I'm kind of crazy. Like I put it on my wrist one day and locked myself in there, and that wasn't the best experience, but it gave me an insight that I think a lot of people may never really get to have. And
Yeah,
then
no.
in our exhibit, in our permanent galleries, we have a replica bus from the Freedom Rides in
Hmm.
1961. And so one of the Freedom Rides came through Alabama from Washington, D.C., trying to make it to New Orleans. But when they got into Alabama, they were in Anniston, Alabama, and one of the buses got firebombed by the KKK. And so even though it's not the exact bus that was firebombed, we have a replica bus of a Greyhound bus that looks really cool. When people get in that section, they're always asking like, "Is this one of the real buses?" I was like, "No, this is a replica, but it looks really cool." And so I think that's another section in our galleries that is that I like and that a lot of people resonate with when they
Hmm.
see it.
Absolutely. As the education like director for this organization, and overseeing so many different kinds of programming and so many different kinds of age ranges, do you find a specific age group really connects uh, more than another does?
That's a good question. Yeah, you know, I think maybe two grade levels connect more than others. Here in the state of Alabama, they used to start teaching this civil rights history in the fourth grade, so we used to get a lot of fourth grade field trips. But I really feel like fifth graders resonate a little better.
Mhm.
They have a really good understanding of what equality is and equity, and their questions are really good. And then I also think that for some reason 10th graders also start to kind of resonate with this information. Um, I don't know why. It just I don't know if it's because of how the standards are structured here in the state,
Mhm.
or is it more of a maturity or understanding about inequalities and things that make a little more sense at those ages.
Yeah, as an educator, and someone who's taught in a classroom, someone who now teaches the entire public, right? What is something about the civil rights movement, and even maybe more specifically, just because yesterday was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, like of Dr. King's legacy, that I'm asking you to take a big thing and conjunct it here, right? But what's one thing that you would want everyone to walk away with?
Um, well, maybe three things. So the first thing will be that this history is really not that old.
Mhm.
You know, people are still alive that participated in the movement, and we can actually talk to them and hear the lessons that they've learned and have that resonate. The other thing that I would say is that um, even though Martin Luther King Jr. gets kind of um, we highlight his "I Have a Dream" speech a lot, which is wonderful. That was where King was at that time. But by the time he was assassinated, King was really on a different path and trajectory of integration and was more on a economic equality path, more on an anti-war path, and an anti-racism path. And so he was more with trying to see the country do specific things to help alleviate some of those things. And then the last thing I would say would be King and Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth and these other leaders. All they really wanted to see was this country live up to everything that our forefathers established and wanted to see this country live up to.
Mhm.
I would call Martin Luther King Jr. probably one of the biggest and greatest patriots in our country. He understood the United States of America. He loved this country, and he just wanted this country to live up to all of its creeds, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and all the things that was been established to make this country be the so-called greatest democracy in the world. He wanted to see that come to fruition.
Mhm.
And so those would be the three main things that I will focus on. Um and let people know that these people loved America. They didn't hate America. They wanted to see this country be all that it could be.
It's amazing. You know, to your very first point about, history isn't that old, I literally just saw something today. I just read something that was Anne Frank, Martin Luther King, and I think it was Barbara Walters were all born in the same year. So like we have this
Wow.
figure who was born at the same time, who's like still very prevalent. We know a lot about her and was born during these other two big historical figures that we think, like you said, like this was so long ago, and it really wasn't. They're still recent. There's still like you said, there's still people from that time period and who went through all that.
Right.
And then perfect transition, because you brought up Shuttleworth again. We do have a question from online. Can you tell us a little bit more about Shuttleworth? You said he was the least known, and we would like to know more, to know a few of his significant contributions.
So, um, I'm glad you asked. So Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth was he's from Mount Meigs, Alabama, which is right outside Montgomery, and he was a early leader in the movement. He was a graduate of Selma University, and he became a pastor early on. But his first pastoring gig was in Birmingham in 1953 at Bethel Baptist Church. And one of the major contributions that Fred did to the for the city of Birmingham was that he was an early activist to fight for the equality of public amenities or city amenities. So what does that mean? During this time period, the segregation era, blacks did not have things like running water in their homes. They still had to use outhouses and things of that nature. They did not have paved roads and sidewalks. They didn't have some of these trash pickup. They didn't have some of these basic city amenities that white communities had. And so one of the first things that Fred did as pastor of Bethel Baptist Church in 1953 was to start to hound the city and get on the city about equating these basic um, necessities that were becoming um, the way of of the time. Like as innovations and things came along, things changed and people houses became better, but blacks weren't able to experience that. And so that's the first thing that Fred started to fight for, that started to put a target on his back with not only the local police but also the KKK. The other thing he did was he wanted to clean up his neighborhood, and so he started getting notoriety from local blacks because he was cleaning up the shot houses and the prostitution areas and things that brought the neighborhood down. And so those were the early things that put Fred on the map. And when the Montgomery bus boycott started, Fred was the membership coordinator for the NAACP for Jefferson County. And so the NAACP was very active in Montgomery, and so Fred was active in Montgomery as well. And so when the Montgomery bus boycott broke out, Fred was involved. He was so involved that he helped Martin Luther King Jr. get access to a black-owned insurance company out of Birmingham that wrote policies for drivers who were carpooling during that movement, who were getting harassed by the police for functioning as a taxi without the proper insurance and licensing. And so when I say Fred is the unsung, and he was involved in just about everything. He was really there from the get go. Due to the success of the Montgomery bus boycott, though, the state of Alabama filed an injunction to outlaw the NAACP. This was the state trying to literally stop the modern day civil rights movement that began out of the Montgomery bus boycott that lasted over a year. And they were trying to shut this down, and they thought by outlawing the NAACP they could. Well, Fred went to the state, saw the law that they used to outlaw the NAACP, and brought together about 60 other pastors in the city of Birmingham and started the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. So that the NAACP was outlawed because of a law in the state of Alabama that says that outside entities can't set up shop in the state, or they have to give a roster of all of their members if they do set up shop. And so because the NAACP refused to give up that roster, and I promise you people would have died if they did, they were outlawed. And so Fred realized that if he started an organization that was religious based, because those organizations don't have to give up their rosters, local, that he could circumvent what they were trying to do with the NAACP. So that's why it's the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights, and not civil rights at that time, because that had become a hot word as well. And so
Hmm.
um and that organization is considered the first grassroots civil rights organization that was created. And so when it came time for them to start the SCLC, Martin Luther King Jr. and Ralph Abernathy sought out Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth to learn how to create an organization, a grassroots civil rights based organization. And so that's why he's a co-founding member of the SCLC as well,
Hmm.
became their first secretary. But he was instrumental in understanding how to use the legalities, I guess you could say, that were going on at the time, to be able to create organizations to pick up these type of movements and be successful with them. And so that's a long-winded, example. But when I say that Fred was arrested over 40 times, and he also may go down in his history as the one person to have the most court cases going on at the same time, about 40 cases with his name on it, as he also understood how to leverage the courts to try and dismantle segregation. And so one of Fred's many quotes was that he'll either kill segregation or be killed by it. They called him the wild man from Birmingham. And Martin Luther King Jr. called him the most courageous man he had ever met. I hope that answered some of the question.
No, absolutely. That just like blew me away. You know, situation, the people like that in times of such tension and pressure, you know, like from everything to still stand up and to push back and find ways around it to me is just the most impressive. That they have that strength and they have that energy. You know, do you have any other examples of people from this period of history? Because again, like we all know who Martin Luther King is,
Right.
and a lot of the other big players, but who are some of those other people we don't hear about who we should know about that we can go learn more about?
Well, it's so many. So from the SELC, you have people like Wyatt T. Walker. It was Wyatt T. Walker that was there at another event that occurred in Birmingham where he had the idea that Bull Connor may actually use these hoses on people. Bull Connor had threatened to use the hoses on a group of pastors who led a march a couple of weeks before the Children's March. And so Wyatt T. Walker was probably the brainchild behind changing what was known as Project X, which meant unknown, to Project C, which meant confrontation. You also have James Bevel. James Bevel was the organizer that organized the youth and got them involved. You have youth leaders like Reverend Gwendolyn Webb. You have leaders like Miss Janice Kelsey. I was showing her picture in the group with the children sitting down. And these are people that are still around here. They're still kicking. They do speaking engagements. They'll tell people their stories. They teach people the lessons that they learned from the civil rights movement, like how to be obedient, right, and how to follow orders, and how to be nonviolent. Um, Wow, you have Lola Hendricks, who was a youth leader, who was arrested and incarcerated for over 8 days. You have Gloria Lewis, Randall Washington. I have to make sure I get her name correct. Who is also a student leader and was incarcerated. They told her to tell the police that she was 15, which is under 16, so that she wouldn't go to the jail with the adults. But she said it didn't work for her. And so, and a lot of these people are highlighted in a film called The Mighty Times Children's March. You can find it on YouTube. It's also a video that we use as a teaching tool. Usually, before I go out to schools to do outreach, I have them watch this film, learn about these individuals, and then if I can, I bring one of the individuals that was reflected in the film to come speak to the youth. And so, and Fred was very instrumental in making sure that the Children's March was a successful march. King was incarcerated for a lot of that time, and so Fred took the reins and made sure that the youth followed orders and were participatory and wanted to fill the jails, and that's what they did.
That's amazing. I can't like even begin to just express how important it is and how what an amazing educational tool that these people are still here to go share with students and like make that such a more meaningful lesson and so much more what's the word I'm looking for? Just like to really anchor them into it and the importance of it. Just um we have another question from online. You referred to some recordings during your presentation. Where can those recordings be found?
So if you go to our YouTube page, it's bcri.org.
Oh no, we lost him. Oh, oh gosh, what a terrible time to lose our presenter. Um, in the middle of a sentence. Well, I'm so sorry. We're close enough to time as it is. But it sounds like those videos are on their YouTube page, and I will be sending out an after action email. I wonder if he's going to pop back in here in a second. But that after action email will include a link to their website, which you'll be able to find their YouTube through that, as well as a link to the recording of this evening's program. I want to thank everybody so much for joining us this evening. I love Night with Museum, and I love spending this time with y'all. Our next museum on the docket in February is going to be the Lake Placid Olympic Museum. And we're getting our Winter Olympics, so let's celebrate and learn a little bit of history about the Olympics. Our Lake Placid Olympic Museum is actually being brought in partnership with I want to say maybe 13, 15 libraries from around the state of Illinois. So this could be a big program. So excited to have so many more friends with us for that session. So make sure you sign up and register for that one if you haven't already. Um, and then after that, in March, we are going to have the National First Ladies Museum back to celebrate Women's History Month and in honor of America 250, talk about some of the most influential uh, glass ceiling breaking first ladies in our history. So we'll see y'all next time. Thank you so much for being with